Tom, what do you think of this guy? Think we ought to pick him up?
Nah, let him go. The local police will take care of him. He's just another one of these refugees.
Just another one of these refugees. Another one of 10 million refugees in Central Europe today. People of German origin whose ancestors settled in countries outside of Germany 180 years ago. At the end of the war, they were driven from their adopted countries back into Germany and Austria. Today, they are people without land or possessions, without even the status of displaced persons, for there is no country to which they can be returned. This is the story of a refugee who came to the city of Linz in Austria in the summer of 1948. Name, Roland Venner. Age, 24. Former occupation, divinity student. Former residence, a Russian prison camp, 3 years. Purpose in visiting Austria, to find his only relative, his mother. Present address, a cellar in a bombed-out house. Church bells on Sunday speak a universal language. Here in Linz, they say the same thing that they say from churches all over America, all over the world. To Roland Venner, church bells say nothing. They speak in a language learned long ago, but forgotten now, drowned out perhaps by the brutal sounds of war, forgotten during endless days behind barbed wire, when just to stay alive was a man's all-consuming purpose. He hears these bells, but thinks only that he needs a shave. He is more concerned with avoiding the police than listening to church bells. He can't risk detention and cross-questioning, or anything that will delay him in his search for his mother. But the church bells have given Roland an idea. Perhaps a church could give him clues. Perhaps someone in this congregation might know his mother. She herself might even be among these people. Neighbors back home had told him that she had come to this city after the war. So he talks with the pastor. To Pastor Kleitman, Roland's story is a familiar one, and he's sorry he doesn't recognize the name, but he promises to make inquiries. Meanwhile, he is concerned about Roland himself, and he offers him temporary shelter and food at the mission. Before the war, his church maintained a home for needy students, but it was ruined by shell fire. Here, as in hundreds of churches throughout Europe and Asia, the needs are legion. Buildings must be repaired. Equipment for church schools and hospitals must be replaced. Money is needed too, for youth camps, to train leaders, and to supplement the meager salaries of ministers. At times like these, Pastor Kleitman thanks God for the help he receives from America through Church World Service. It means that Roland can have a razor, a cake of soap, a clean towel. Just simple, everyday necessities. But to Roland, they are luxuries and clothing. Second-hand, perhaps, but clean and decent looking. And a pair of shoes to replace the worn-out pair he's been wearing. Those shoes have carried him almost 1,000 miles in the last 3 months, through forests and fields and along highways. They have seen him through times when he was so tired and discouraged that only the thought of his mother kept him going. And now, it's not only old shoes and clothing that Roland is leaving behind, it's almost as though he is discarding a former self, a self that had lost faith in the kindliness of his fellow man. The atmosphere of the dining hall seems strangely familiar to Roland. He feels somehow at home, because the surroundings remind him of his days as a divinity student. He begins to talk to the head of the mission about this almost forgotten part of his youth. Pastor Scherer asks him whether he's ever thought of taking up his studies again. No, he has doubts now, and it would cost money. The pastor tells him that a few refugees have been accepted at a theological school in Vienna. Would Roland be interested? Maybe, but first he must find his mother. Pastor Scherer decides to talk to Pastor Kleitman about the idea. The pastors understand Roland's feelings. They have been through the war themselves, lost friends and relatives. They can understand doubt and confusion, but they are impressed with Roland's honesty and intelligence, and they decide to write to Vienna about him. The next day, Roland begins his search. He tracks down every clue, no matter how insignificant, and his quest carries him everywhere in the cities and villages near Linz, to wherever refugees have settled in their wanderings, to abandoned factories and shacks that were never meant for human habitation, without heat, sometimes without light, and with only makeshift cooking facilities. This is the way 10 million people live. Several families in a single room, under conditions that make it miraculous that they have survived at all. As the days go on, Roland begins to dread the nightmarish repetition of the puzzled faces, the moments of waiting, the shaking of the head saying no, for the answer is always disappointment. When the trains come in at night, he is waiting at the railroad stations. The faces of the people begin to haunt him, but he never finds a face he knows. And on other nights, he goes into the bunkhouses where the sick and dying are given what little help is available. And the answer is still no. Finally, he gives up the search for the time being. He feels he can no longer take help from the mission when so many others are in need. And so he gets a job clearing rubble and moves in with the family he has met during his wanderings. He's registered with the authorities now and even has a work permit and a ration card. But more than that, in this abandoned freight car where the family lives, he has found a home. And he makes a new friend, Pastor Anthony, one of the 2 pastors who must serve 40,000 refugees near Linz. His church is a barracks, and his congregation unbelievably poor. Some emergency help comes to him from the Austrian church through Church World Service. He is able at least to manage a little milk for the children, all of whom are in danger of TB. But his most desperate struggle is to restore faith and hope to people who have become spiritually lost in the years of war. Roland becomes interested in helping Pastor Anthony in this work, and on Sunday afternoons he accompanies him on his visits to the old and the sick, to the tired and the discouraged. He becomes so absorbed in helping these people in whatever little ways he can that he almost forgets his own troubles. And then, the unexpected happens. Roland meets an old lady who once lived in his hometown. She recognizes his name, and then she remembers that his mother came to Austria in the same group with her. She remembers, too, that his mother got sick and was sent to the mountains, to a hospital run by the church. But she never knew exactly where it was. Pastor Anthony says that it could be an old people's home in the tiny mountain village of Gassau. He tells Roland how to get there, and Roland prepares to leave right away. On a Sunday morning, a few weeks later, as Roland is on his way to church, Pastor Anthony brings him news. A letter confirming his acceptance at theological school in Vienna. But Roland is curiously uninterested. Ever since that day in the cemetery, his life has seemed without purpose or meaning. He had built his whole future around the hope of reunion with his mother. Now, he has no future. And as he looks at the letter, he can feel no excitement. He keeps remembering his search. He hears again the voice of the old lady who knew his mother. And he begins to remember the other faces that he has seen in his wanderings. He thinks of the words of Isaiah.
The wind carrieth them away, and the whirlwind scattereth them. They flee from the swords and from the grievousness of war. And he that fleeth from the noise of the fear falleth into the pit. And he that cometh up out of the midst of the pit is taken in a snare. We grope for the wall like the blind. We stumble at noonday, as in the night. We wait for light, but behold, darkness. The grass withereth, the flower fadeth, but the word of our God shall stand forever. Hast thou not known? Hast thou not heard that the everlasting God fainteth not, neither is weary? They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. And a man shall be as a hiding place from the wind, and a covert from the tempest, as rivers of water in a dry place, as the shadow of a great rock in a weary land. Behold, ye fast. Is it a day for a man to afflict his soul, to bow down his head, and to spread sackcloth and ashes unto him? Is not this the fast I have chosen? To loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, and to let the oppressed go free, and that ye break every yoke? Is it not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and that thou bring the poor that are cast out to thy house? And when thou seest the naked, that thou cover him. Then shall thy light break forth as the morning.